Nice to see you again. And hello.
Yeah, it's the first time I'm actually...
Okay, yeah, well I'm, as with the other people here, I work for ELI as one of the teachers. And today we'll be looking at student contracts. Okay, at ELI we do use student contracts as part of our programs. And I'd like to talk about them in a bit more detail today. And with regards to student contracts and self-directed learning, that's learning away from the teacher. Okay. Now I'd like to start off by asking a quick question. What is the purpose of a contract? Why do we use contracts in our lives? All right, to bind us. Okay, yeah, definitely. What else?
Get a commitment.
Yeah, commitment.
An agreement.
An agreement.
Something that you can refer back to.
Yeah, you can refer back to. A promise. They can be short-term. They can be long-term. So if we think of a contract in all those respects, a student contract is a very, very useful piece of program materials. Okay, students can make commitments, an agreement, a promise, responsibility, something that us and them can all refer back to over time. Now, why this topic, learner contracts? Well, for me, when I think about language development, so language development, how people learn languages, there's two main theories that most other theories refer back to. One comes from a man, Krushen, in the early 80s, where he believed you could only become competent in a second language by being in real life situations. That's away from the classroom, living in the real world, how children learn a first language. Then in the early 90s, another academic, Swan, competed against this theory and brought up many hypotheses about learning second languages in the classroom. And her theories have adapted over time to be a big part of different classroom practices that we probably all use, but I'm not exactly sure where they come from. For me, student contract is a balance between the two. Okay, we're balancing between students learning out of the classroom and what they learn and how they learn within the classroom, and it's a very important balance. Now, I will illustrate how a learner contract can answer the following questions throughout this talk. Okay? The first question is, how can students become good language learners? Defined by Noonan. Okay? The second question will be, how can students take control of their own learning? Which is very, very important. And the final question looks at the importance of constantly implementing Vygotsky's scaffolding techniques while answering the previous two questions. So scaffolding students through the process of becoming good language learners, and scaffolding students in how to and why to take control of their own learning. Now, this particular workshop has three parts. We'll start off by, I'll introduce you to the potential outcomes of using a student contract. Now, and I'll provide evidence from the learner's perspective of using student contracts. The evidence I'll provide comes from qualitative studies I've done with many, many students within ELI. And then I'll move on and I'll focus on the design process. This design process focuses on students' individual needs, and it involves a needs analysis for individual learners, and it promotes self-directed learning. And finally, we'll finish up today and I'll move on to look at some practical uses for a learner contract within a program which reinforces self-directed learning. Alright, so I'd like to begin by looking at the potential outcomes of using a student contract. Right now, I'll be doing quite a bit of reading because the information I'm giving you doesn't come from me, it comes from students within ELI. So I'll be using their quotes. It's not my words, it's their words. And this evidence will outline potential outcomes. Okay, I'd like to start off with the major outcome of using a student contract, and that has to do with opening up the student's affective filter. If you're not familiar with this term, an affective filter is what a lot of academics talk about. It's a part of the brain. When someone's highly motivated, it opens through motivation, and it allows new knowledge to be processed much faster. If the affected footer is closed because of no motivation, it makes it harder for students to process new knowledge. And that's not just with language, that's with anything. Alright, so the first outcome I want to focus on is motivation. So I believe it's one of the most important things as teachers. Now, a student of mine, Toan, said, the student contact encourages us to do our own research away from the teacher. Another student, Tam, mentioned, it increases our attention and creativity in practicing English. Student Hung went on to say, the agreement between students and teachers may help to put pressure on students' own research. It is common that most learners prefer spending their time in class rather than improving themselves at home alone. Therefore, the contract is most likely a tool to force learners to invent more time on self-study. Now, Quinn went on to say, so much English practice out of the classroom, which can't be a bad thing. And these points can be summarised by one student new: opportunities to practice English everywhere. Now, the next group of outcomes can be linked to teacher expectations. What the teacher expects from the students. This is very important. The students need to know what we want from them. Now, there are 3 points I'd like to convey here. Okay? As for me, students will be aware that they will succeed or fail depending on their effort, their study, their habits out of the classroom. Not by just coming and sitting and doing the hours in the classroom. Those are my expectations of my students. Now, one student, V, we got here V, okay. V said, one of the first benefits of a study contract is that it makes people obey the terms which are given in the contract. That comes back to the responsibility, the commitment, the promises that we talked about earlier. For example, the contract says that students should do all homework and prepare for the next lesson. Consequently, these students try their best to accomplish all exercises which were given by teachers, whether they want to do them or not. Okay, so they're abiding by their agreements, they're abiding by their promises, by their responsibilities. Another point involving expectations, it makes students aware that the classroom is just one small step in their learning. The classroom is not their life. Alright, and Zap says, the contract has shown clearly what learners should perform to achieve their learning targets. Take out of classroom activity items, for example. Students are unlikely to have the habit of creating a wide range of activities for obtaining knowledge away from class. The contract creates that habit. It gives them the opportunities to create new habits away from the class. And the final point involving expectations involves a joint collaboration between the teacher and the students. They jointly collaborate with the student to outline their targets out of class, how they're going to do things, and what the teachers should expect from the students. And V goes on to say, the contract also helps human beings acquire the responsibility and the awareness of what they are doing. For instance, once students sign the contract, they have to be responsible to what they agree to. So the students take the contract very, very seriously if we take it seriously. Now, the final outcomes I would like to mention involve, firstly, classroom management. Okay, so classroom management. Students will be aware that there's benefits of having rules within and out of the classroom concerning their learning. Now, Nam says, not only does it help students try hard in order to follow the requirements and rules of the contract, but also they get the success in their education. Now, the next point regards program development. All right. Quinn says, it helps us orientating study purposes. It helps to concentrate on problems and overcome them in and out of the classroom. So once again, the teacher's not the focal point. The students move away from the teacher and tackle their own problems. They're helped with this, so we'll discuss that later. And finally, in relation to developing self-study skills, it creates a determination to apply self-study skills out of the classroom. T says, by this detailed list of activities, students can be opened up to self-learning and some specific ways to practice their learning. So in summary, with regards to the outcomes of using a student contract in a particular way, which we'll move on to later, these students have talked about positive influences on, firstly, motivation. Teacher expectations are clear. It helps them achieve their learning targets. Students take responsibility for their own learning. It assists with classroom management. It helps with program development. It helps extending learning out of the classroom. And finally, it assists in developing self-study skills, which those 7 points, any one of them is great to have within your students. To have all 7 makes life much easier as a teacher. Now, in the next part of this talk, this involves the design process. Together, we'll design a first draft of a study contract. It won't be your final draft, because you need to go away and work with your students. It'll be a first draft. Now, you'll need the handout that I've given people when they came in. The people who are a little late, I'll give it to you now. There you go. Who else? Needs one? Yep. Here we go. Okay.
Thank you.
There we go. Oh, one more of this. Okay. So, we'll complete this handout together, okay? Please smile to the person next to you and enjoy working together. Alright, so there are 2 main parts to the study contract which I found most useful. The first part concerns in-class obligations. Obligations in the classroom that students must follow. These are rules set by the teacher, by you, for within your classroom. Now, for me, I allocate one simple general rule within 5 categories. Okay, these rules are there to familiarise students within a new environment from day one. All our students come from different places, have different past experiences. I like to familiarise them to my classroom. Now, with the following classroom rule categories that we'll look at shortly, okay? Now, these are just examples that I've used with one group of students. Over time, new rules are created. But these examples unleash a sort of schematic behavioural system where other rules they've taken from different parts of their lives align to these specific categories. Now, there are 5 topic categories for the obligations. Alright, first, I look at institutional rules. Alright, these are rules that are not for me. These come from my workplace, which currently is ELI. Okay? Your workplaces may be different. You have different institutional rules. Okay? The next set of rules concerns the amount of effort with English they want to use. Okay? I let the students decide how much English they want to use in the classroom and what type of English they want to use. It's not my decision, it's their decision. The next part moves on to teachers' methodology. I give the students a main idea of what my core methodology is as a teacher. So they know from day one what to expect from me, what I want from them. And for me, I found it very important to give them some sort of teamwork rule to help with interrelationships. They all come to your classroom, maybe they don't know each other. A rule they must abide by to bond as learners. And finally, a cultural rule, my cultural rule. that I want them to abide by within the classroom. Okay? Now, over time, these rules change, they adapt, depending how long the students study with me. And the students will allocate other rules within these categories. Now, I've given you a handout. I'll just hide that one. I'd like you to think about your own situations, your own classrooms. That was from my classroom. My classroom's different than yours. I have a different methodology than you. I have different students than you. I probably have much different aims than you. So I'd like you to think about your classroom and use this sheet and write down 5 rules. Number 1. What's an institutional rule from your workplace? What's a rule that your workplace gives you as a teacher that your classroom must abide by? Any rule. Something you think is important. Amount of English use. What's a rule regarding the English the students use in your classroom? Think of your own. What do you want them to use? Okay? They need to make a decision of how much of that English they decide to use. What's your core methodology as a teacher? We're probably all very, very different. We all come from different cultural backgrounds, different training, different life experiences. What's the one main thing you believe in as a teacher that students must do to learn English? Teamwork? What's some advice or encouragement you'd like to give the students to work together, to move away from you, so the first person they ask is not you, it's the person next to them. Okay? And a cultural rule. Okay? What's a cultural rule that's important to you? I'm from Australia. I've chosen an Australian cultural rule, something that I want my students to do, because if they don't do it, it drives me crazy. What's something you want your students to do to make the classroom a better place? Okay? I'll leave it open to you. Okay? Alright, so I'll give you 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, can you please just write down in point form 5 general ideas and share them with the people next to you. I'm here if you have any questions. Di, this is Liz. Liz, this is Di. Do you think of any rules that are important to you as a teacher? Don't worry too much, you don't need the perfect answer today. It's more just something for you to think about. And this will develop over time. The 5 rules you saw from me, these are my 5 rules, okay? They're mine. These weren't the first rules that I ever wrote. I could not tell you how many different copies I've done of student contracts. Okay? And your rules will develop over time as well. Now, I'll leave teachers' methodology to you, okay? Everyone will be different. I'm not here to tell you how you should be teaching. You have your own context, your own situation, your own students, and their own development. Being different than other people in the classroom is fine if you get the outcomes you're after. If you don't get the outcomes you're after, that's when we need to think about our own progression as teachers. Okay? Now, teamwork. Does anyone have a quick example of a teamwork rule that they would like to give their classroom?
Don't talk when somebody else is.
All right.
Part of teamwork, I suppose. If I ask somebody, what do you think is the answer for question 3, and they're speaking, and 2 people over in the corner are going,
yeah,
and not listening.
Fine. So that's important for his classroom. That's his rule. Okay. What about a cultural rule? All of us come from slightly different cultures. All right. I can see 6 or 7 different nationalities in this room now. Okay. Do you have any cultural rules that you would like your students to follow?
Well, you see that in my class, students are not allowed to use the verbal form.
Okay, that's your rule. Okay. If you, maybe as teachers, if you see a problem in society with Vietnamese children and you want your students not to do that, you can bring that into the classroom. Teach them different social habits. Okay. This is a social habit for me. Okay. I focused on social habits where if they're around me or my friends, I want them to be socially accurate. Okay? I don't want them to stand out, to look rude, because they might not be rude people, but they just don't know socially how they should behave in that situation, which a lot of foreigners probably are still learning to do in Vietnam. Okay? Alright, that's the first part. That's in classroom obligations. Now I'd like to move on to the second part of the contract, which concerns out of classroom obligations. Now, this is quite a difficult area for me to work out over time. To help me with out of classroom obligations, I used an academic, Noonan. You may have seen some of his books around. I like him very much, okay? He did some research in 1991 concerning good language learners, what he classified as good language learners. And he gave them a definition at the end of his research. Okay? This research involved 44 Southeast Asian students who all became bilingual and who all became very high-level and respected teachers throughout Southeast Asia. He interviewed them over time. Now, with the following research that I'm about to show you, gives a brief overview of these 44 good language learners from Southeast Asia's common beliefs, okay, and learning behaviour that they think was important for them, okay. It goes on about, it shows their teaching experiences, their learning experiences. For me, it provides ideas on what and where students can find materials and situations out of the classroom to use in their study. Okay? Now, firstly, we'll look at what the 44 research people said and believe deeply that helped them the most in acquiring English as a second language. Okay? So you notice here, the classroom came in as number 4. As teachers, a lot of teachers tend to think the classroom is the most important place. Well, for these people it wasn't. It came in as number 4. Okay? This is a group of people from throughout Southeast Asia. Right? For them, conversations with English speakers or conversations in groups was more important, okay, than formal learning or learning with a teacher. Finding opportunities to practice outside of class, much more important than learning with a teacher. Okay? Accessing media, radio, television, newspapers, much more important than learning with a teacher. Okay? These are successful bilingual people that are part of our profession. Okay? So I hope that opens up our mind a bit how to think for the next part when we complete the contract. Now, alright, now for this provides ideas for me about learning preferences and past and present ideologies for good language learners. It provides ideas for me how to look at out of classroom materials. What out of classroom materials I should be trying to help my students use. My students probably want this, but they don't know how to get the most from them, and that's my job. Alright. Now, these results could be analysed in many different ways. Okay, but these responses help me with the materials I use. I'd like to move on to some other research from Noonan. Now, the same group of people, the same research subjects. As students, they enjoyed, this is the classroom here. Out of the classroom, out of the classroom. As students, these are the type of things that they enjoy. Watching television, going on excursions, watching pictures, films, video, reading newspapers, talking about their own interests, talking to friends. Okay? Small group work and in-class conversations were much lower for them, for these 44 research subjects. Now, ways of learning that help them the most, okay, this is important. So, it's what they think helped them the most, okay? The ways of learning that help them the most. We've got newspapers, television, learning by doing, talking to friends, practicing out of class. Okay? They believe these ways help them the most to learn English. Then we've got small group work, in-class conversations. Okay, so see the transition. As students, they enjoyed this. They believe this helped the most. Okay? Now, if these people had the time to learn a third language, another language, this is what they would do. Classroom down here. Okay? I'm not saying the classroom's not important, but it's not everything. Okay? They'd be looking for speakers to talk to. They'd be watching as much media as they possibly could. If they learn something, they want to do it. They want to use it in real life as much as they can. Talk to friends, practice out of class, watching television. That's how they would tackle a new language. However, these 44 successful learners, good language learners, are teachers. And as teachers, this is what they do. Okay? They learn by games in the classroom. They use pictures, films, video. Great. They learn by doing. Great. Their students. What they introduce to their students. Having a course book, small group work. Okay, so they're pushing their classroom back up the hierarchy. Whereas people, they push it down here. But as teachers, they're still pushing it up. This is still great, I think. Most teachers will put this at the top. Okay? Still very, very positive. But it shows a slight transition between what they want, what they think they need, what they believe help them the most, and what they do. Two different things. Now, there's 4 questions I'd like to ask you. If we look back at this, we have out of classroom obligations. Okay, there's 4 questions I'd like you to work together, share your ideas, everyone will be different, and complete this chart. Just in note form, because you will change it later. Okay. Now, well, the first question is to everyone, what do good language learners do? These are good language learners. What do they do? Can anyone answer that question for me? Well, they talk. Where? Well, where do they talk? Outside, anywhere, everywhere. They find places to talk, away from the classroom. So, in my contract, how am I going to get my students to do that? Okay? What else do they do? If you look at this, well, nothing's wrong. What ideas do you have? What do good language learners do?
Homework.
All right, homework. Okay, there's not much homework there.
They watch as material as possible.
Yeah, they want contact with English. If they can't get it from you and me, not as teachers, as people outside the classroom, they find where to get it. They're going to the TV, they're going to the newspapers, they're going to the internet. They're finding it. And that's more important to them. Okay? All right, now. Now, I have 2 questions I'd like you to answer in your group. So we'll look at this one. What do good learners do? I'd like you to answer these ones for yourself. Just predict. Okay? It might be hard for us who have English as a first language and don't actually, or are not very competent in a second language. We tend not to think like this a lot. Okay? What materials and situations can your students have contact with away from the classroom? Okay, think of Danang, think of their houses, think of their friends. What can they get contact with? Okay, and what materials and situations would your learners enjoy using? If they don't enjoy it, they won't use it. Okay, I'll give you a few minutes together. Could you please talk about those 2 points? Question 2 and question 3.
Situation.